All right, guys, and welcome to Preacher Man TV. It's good to see you. I think my comments is on a. Ooh, that's me. I think my comments is on a little delay today, right? Because I decided to try to do it a different way. So it's good to see you, and I really want to get down into what we have to talk about today. This is day 3 of the spirit of the Antichrist in the world as we know it today, and what that looks like. But before we do that, let's shout out who is in here with me. And today it's my boy Jesh. Right. So I see some people they were on here before we even started. So we have Stephen Peters, right? So we had to give him a shout out there, and Arion, right? And Nicholas Borgesano is on there, the man we call Douche, right? Clint Peters is there, right? Praise Jesus, Clint is awake. That's a rare thing. But don't worry, every time Hope NYC is on, he's awake. Right? Cardo Jacob is on there. I seen somebody say hi, Sister Petal, but me I seen Sister Petal. Oh yeah, she down there, man. My bird on here. Right? And Road Short. Good, hey, good stuff today. All right, good. Trisha Isaac, Trisha here. All right. Big up Jesh. Jesh get big up. All right. So Jesh was like, did that thing he just did there. I hope you heard him. Right. So today we are going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk about the people from Revelation chapter 13 and 1. And you might say, where did you see the people in that? I'm going to show you in a minute. And then after that, I'm going to talk about Revelation chapter 13 and 17. I call that section buy or sell. So let's start with the people. Let's read Revelation chapter 13 and verse 1. It says, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his head the name of blasphemy." Right? And that's something like it there. Right? And I'm not going to go through the entire beast today. I'll tell you why. Because that's extensive, and that is not actually what I want to talk about. I want to talk about where the beast is standing and why that is important. Right? So the Bible tells us that the beast rose up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And we know that is metaphorical. It means something. The sea, when you look at that and you look at prophecy, a lot of the time the sea is symbolic of chaos raging in the need of rebuking, wild and unruly. So the beast will rise up out of a chaotic world. I do not know what a chaotic world looks like. Is there anybody who could show me? Oh, probably like that. I don't know, right? So that's what a chaotic world looks like. So if you haven't been watching your TV, you don't know what a chaotic world really looks like, right? But if you've been watching your TV, you're going to know what chaos is, right? We're going to see, the Bible tells us, of a world engulfed in blasphemy, because the Bible says upon the heads, the 7 heads and the 10 horns, right? And upon the heads is the name of blasphemy. Right? So that tells us the heads represent rulers, the horns represent kings. That tells us in the last day, and upon each head is written the word, the name of blasphemy. That tells us that we are going to have antichrist rulers, anti-God, an anti-God ruling class. Every generation in the history of humanity had something called a ruling class, right? And even in today's world, we have a ruling class. But I believe today's ruling class has a bigger God complex than any other ruling class that has gone before. Now, that's a big statement. I'll tell you why. Because we had people like Nebuchadnezzar. We had people like, Alexander the Great. A lot of these people had God complexes. They taught themselves to be great. The pharaohs of Egypt, they called themselves the evening and the morning star and things like that, right? And they thought that they were gods. But today we have people who deem themselves to be close to God. If not, they are seeking to become demigods, right? And that's what's happening in the world today, whether you choose to believe that or not. The problem with that is a lot of them believe that the way that they could procure such a status is from Lucifer, who is the prince of this world, right? So a lot of them are in Luciferian worship, and we could talk about that another day. I don't want to get into that, right? So the Bible tells us that we're going to live in a very, very, very chaotic world. We'll see a world engulfed in blasphemy. If you guys haven't watched the movies, then you will not then you might be in the dark. I don't know how many of you went and you saw the movie It, right? The remake of the movie It. I tried to start to watch that because I remember watching that as a kid or when I was a teenager or something like that. And when I was watching it the second time around, the remake, these little kids were cussing in such an ugly way, and nearly every single word that they or expletive that they use, use the name of Jesus Christ with it, right? And these are just kids. And of course, we have adults making the kids do this. But we live in a world where blasphemy is an art. That is a sign of the Antichrist, my friends. No two ways about that. But that's just light things. We're going to get into some deep things now. If you look at the book of 2 Timothy 3, 1-5, I want to kind of define what the chaos was going to look like. Know this also, that in the last days perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of their own selves. You think about what that means. Covetous, will be looking at other people's stuff, trying to take it. I don't know, probably it might look something like looting, right? Boasters, proud. I don't even need to define these. Blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection. And if you haven't seen that, I'm sure everybody saw the video of George Floyd being killed. That's one. That's unnatural. That's without natural affection. But I hope you also saw the other videos where poor little business owners were being beaten in front of their business trying to protect it. What they worked their lives to build. I saw people take up humongous pieces of wood and beat a little lady. I don't understand what that is about. You understand? Because probably she was the wrong color. Let me tell you, we are going to see a world without natural affection? No, we are already seeing it. Truce breakers, false accusers. And if you guys didn't get that yet, we live in a world of the Me Too movement where we say believe every woman unless it's inconvenient to us. Enough said about that. Incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. The Bible says, from such, turn away. In case you were wondering what chaos looks like, I just defined it there. I just described it there. That was 2 Timothy 3, 1-5. So, you tell me if we have chaos in our world. Oh, guys, it's going to get better. Revelation 17 and 15 tells us, remember in Revelation 13 and 1, the beast rose up out of the sea. But Revelation 17 and 15 tells us, and he said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. Peoples, multitudes, and nations and tongues. Right? So, if the waters that the beasts are standing on is chaos, but it's also the people, check this out. First of all, the beast is going to rise up out of the people. That means we're looking at somebody who is deemed to be democratically selected. In other words, we have a perception of power given to the people to choose. Right? So the people are going to believe that they're in charge. Right? Now, in Revelation 17 and 5, we see a woman sitting on a beast. She is called Mystery Babylon, the great whore. This is a nation. We believe it to be a nation or a great city. But it's also a system who will be upheld by, hear it now, upheld by peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Right? So, the Bible is telling us that the beast is going to stand on that. We are going to be upheld by, that beast is going to be upheld by the divisions being perpetrated today. What are the divisions? We are being divided amongst the peoples. We are being divided by different groups. We're being divided by nations, and we're being divided by tongues. We're being divided by race, right? So there are so many divisions amongst us. And this is the thing that is going to give strength to Mystery Babylon. Mystery Babylon is going to be built on the division of humanity. Get that. Get that. And this division is what we see as chaos. That chaos is going to generate is going to generate the spirit of the Antichrist that will envelop the world. I hope you're getting this. Right? So, what is happening here, and I want you to see this, and I want you to listen to me very, very, very carefully. Satan will create a problem that he will come in to solve. Satan will create a problem and he will come with the solution to that problem. You get? That is what Satan does. Right? And we've seen horrible dictators in the past use that strategy. That is a demonic strategy. What they do, they create a problem and then come in and use that problem to exalt themselves. Right? There's a quote from Stalin that I'm going to read for you later on down. He was saying, you just perpetrate terrorism and the people will beg you to make laws that will basically enslave them. You think about that. Right? So, I mean, you right now in our society, in American society, anywhere you go in the world, anybody could perpetrate anything if they want to see a certain ideology come to pass. The Antichrist will capitalize from the chaos in the earth. He will be the apparent answer to the problems plaguing the earth. How do I know that? Because the Bible tells us in Daniel 9:27, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation. And that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Right? So he's going to make a peace treaty, not with just Israel and Palestine. He will make a peace treaty with many. In other words, he's going to bring peace to the world. He's going to appear to solve the problems of the world. He will speak of peace, and the only ones who are going to oppose the Antichrist, get ready for this, the only ones who are going to oppose him when he does that is the true church that remains. Because the church is going to be taken up, but there will be some that will come to the knowledge of the truth, and they will oppose him. Right? But the spirit of the Antichrist that will oppose the true church is already in the earth. The true church will be seen as anarchists, racists, hypocrites, fundamentalists, terrorists, bigots, xenophobic, you name it. That's what they're going to call the church. The evangelical church, evangelical church has already been placed on some list. I read a paper that a man wrote citing what? Christian terrorism in America. I'm like, what on earth are you even talking about? And he likened it to the unfair comparison when Christian terrorism is so bad and we demonize other religions when other religions don't even have it as half as bad or some nonsense like that he was saying. Right? So they're going to call Christians terrorists in the last day, and it has already been done. You figure out where we are living. Figure it out. If you decide that you want to live in God's world, you want to live according to God's rule, and you want to believe the Bible as for what it is, you know what they're going to call you? A fundamentalist, a radical. The people of the earth themselves, right? The beast is going to rise up out of the sea. That's what the Bible tells us. They're going to be in chaos, and they're going to look at the beast and they say, who could be compared to the beast, right? They will basically praise and usher in a leader, the beast, that will torment them. That is what is going to happen in the world today. People are fighting all over this world, and people are fighting for equality and justice and blah 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 and blah blah blah. And right now they have to stop and ask themselves if they are not fighting for a beast that will torment them in the long run. Think about that. So, in the spirit of the Antichrist is going to have a major effect on the world, on the people of the world, nations, tongues, tribes, all these people, and they are going to be chaotic, but they're going to have divisions, and those divisions will give rise to the beast, and the beast will find its footing on those things. You tell me if the spirit of the Antichrist is in the world yet. I'm not saying anything. It's up to you to make that decision. All right. So, next point that I want to get to, I call this one buy or sell, and it's taken from Revelation chapter 13 and verse 17. Right? Mark of the beast, right? That, and the Bible says, and there shall be a mark of the beast, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of that name. Now, for years, ever since I was a little boy, whenever we read that scripture, all we talk about is the mark of the beast. And it's a microchip, and they're going to put it here, and then into here, and then they want to inject it, and they want to put a tattoo. And people miss the other part that, in my opinion, is the more obvious part. We don't know what the mark of the beast is. All we know, it's a mark, right? It's going to be there, whether it be a tattoo or whatever. In my opinion, that's quite highly inconsequential. What I think is more important is what the mark does. The Bible says without that mark, you can't buy or sell. Now, this is a social philosophy, right? It looks like an economic philosophy, but it's a social philosophy. And I'll show you how. I'll tell you what that philosophy is. It's called Marxism. This is a mark of Marxism, socialism, and communism. That's what it is. The permission to buy and to sell, the regulation of those things, down to the point where we're basing it on you as an individual, that sounds like Marxism. I'm going to show you now. What is Marxism? Because I talk about it all the time, and I realize a lot of people don't know what Marxism is, right? So what is Marxism? Let me tell you. I'll define it twice for you. Marxism, the political and economic theories of Karl Marx and Fred Engels. But Marx is the one who basically brought the whole thing up. Later developed by their followers to form the basis of the theory and practice of communism. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, the two guys you're looking at right now, they are atheists, or they were, no longer alive, right? Most, if not of their adherents, the people who listen to them, are atheists, but believers. But the believers in Christ themselves would be duped by this philosophy ignorantly. Why? Because they don't know what it is, right? Because it appeals to the carnal, materialistic nature of man. Let me show you how diabolical the devil is. Even in the church, we have people who preach about money and prosperity and the amount you have, and they appeal to the materialistic side of people. I remember seeing a car bumper sticker, right? My prosperity is God's priority, right? My prosperity is God's priority. Yes, Karl Marx, right? And I wouldn't call him a philosopher. I'd call him more like a radical, but he's not a philosopher, right? So Karl Marx, and a lot of people would have learned of him in school, and they would not have heard a bad thing. This man was a rotten individual, right? He was a loser. He was more or less what we would call a bum. You know, if he wasn't forced by the society that he was living in, I'm sure this dude would be living in his mother's basement, sitting in his jockey shorts, eating a bowl of, Cheerios with sour milk from 2 weeks ago because he's too lazy to get up to go to the fridge to get a new one, right? But Marxism is a political and economic way of organizing society, where the workers own the means of production. Socialism comes out of Marxism. Socialism is a way of organizing a society in which the means of production are owned and controlled by the proletariat. Marx proposed that this was the next necessary step in the progress of history. So what it's basically saying is, instead of being like these evil capitalists who start these business, make millions of dollars, and then pay the people next to nothing, he says we should have the people who are actually doing the work to actually own the means of production, and they are the ones who should be making all the profit. And that sounds nice, and that's why that's actually Marxism for dummies right there, right? That was the easiest explanation I could come up with. But the bottom line is this: people don't actually stop to think through and consider all the ramifications of this, right? Because if everyone were to have the means of production, right, then you wouldn't have the demand. If you have a demand, you can't sell. If you can't sell, nobody's going to be buying because everybody have the means of production in the first place. But people don't understand how that works, and capitalism could be used as ugly as well because it has been used in the past, but not to the extent of socialism. So Marxism was intended to sound evolutionary. In other words, it will evolve. It is a natural progression, a natural order of things. That's what Karl Marx said. He said after a while, the normal people, the average man will rise up and seize control, right? And that is a natural progression, a natural order of things. But unfortunately, all the people who have subscribed to Marxism, they have been bent on helping the progression. In other words, they want to make the evolution happen. It's like Piltdown Man in literal evolution. It's like that where they fake the skull combined with the chimpanzee, and they said they found it. It's the same thing that the Marxists try to do. They try to make Marxist philosophy come to pass. And I'm going to show you what this thing is. Right? Marxism's outcome is inevitable. It leads to socialism. If socialism is a doorway, communism is the room that it leads to. If socialism is a doorway, communism is the room that is the room that it leads to. In socialism, the means of production is given to the people, but you still need regulation, right? Who's going to regulate if the means of production is given to the people? The state is going to regulate that. That's why in the last day, we're going to see, unless you take that mark, there'll be no buying or selling for you. You will starve. So the state is not going to regulate, just like how we say the devil create a problem and bring the solution to it. The state is going to regulate, one hand giving, the next hand collecting. That's how it's going to work. It's simply like the French Revolution. That's how the French Revolution actually happened. And I spoke about it 100 times, I think. You know, what the Jacobins did, the people who wanted to overthrow France, right? They basically were the ones owning the food supply, right? And they basically brought a famine. They cut off the food supply and then blamed it on the king and the queen, saying that they're eating lavishly while the people are starving. The people rose up, they went in, they had their violent protests and their riots. They drugged the king and the queen out, and they killed the king. Right? They killed the king. And up to this day, history records that he was a man who oppressed his people, when the truth it was the Jacobins who had done it. Right? It's the same Marxist philosophy that we're looking at here. Right? So, let me talk to you about some a famous Marxist. Nah? All right. This Marxist said this. And I'm looking at my comments, and I want you to tell me who you think said this, right? We are socialists. We are the enemies of today's capitalistic system for the exploitation of the economically weak, with its unfair salaries, with its unseemly evaluation of a human being according to the wealth and property instead of responsibility and performance. And we are determined to destroy this system under all conditions. Who said it? Who do you think? I'll tell you who said it. Adolf Hitler. Right? Hitler said that because Hitler was Marxist. Marxism removes individuality and places the state as the governor, the supreme over all. You know what they call that? Collectivism. This is the crux of today's identity politics. This is the crux of today's identity politics. What do you mean by that? Marxism doesn't look at the individual. Socialism doesn't look at the individual, even though it sounds like it does. But when you look at the people who subscribe to this philosophy, they always tend to classify groups, just like we saw the beast in Revelation chapter 17 standing on the different peoples and the multitudes and the nations and the tribes, right? Today's identity politics that we look at, and this is the language of all the politicians, they talk about the blacks and the whites and the minorities and the migrants and the unemployed, and they talk about the 1%. And I see in Trinidad right now, a lot of people are talking about the 1%. You know, everywhere you go in the world, we have the 1% now, right? So that is what collectivism is. They never see the individual. You understand? For instance, a lot of people were protesting George Floyd. Nobody really ever looked at the individual George Floyd. We could have taken any face and put it onto that man once it was black. And that sounds bad, but that's the truth. Because, and why do I say that? I'm not trying to be mean. The reason why I say that is because I listened to one commentator, and he said it matters not. It really doesn't matter, you know, what that man had done or who he is. What really matters is what was done to him, right? And the truth is, we must look at the gospel of Jesus Christ and realize, and this is what I preached on Sunday, that the cross of Jesus Christ, it is at its very center, there is a paradox, a collision, a clash, right? But that clash enables the cross to stretch infinitely and to grow infinitely without changing its state. What does that tell you? Christianity in itself is tailored for every individual. That's why the cross could go in any size to fit anybody, but it will never ever lose its shape. That is the crux of Christianity, right? The Christianity and the gospel of Jesus Christ, it ministers to the individual. Speaking of individual, here's another quote from this person, Hitler. In case you don't know who Hitler is, guys, and I realize there's a lot of young people in the world who don't know what the Holocaust and Hitler is, I recommend you go research that one yourself, because that's one of the greatest atrocities that the world has ever seen. Hitler, that the individual should come to realize that his own ego is of no importance in comparison with the existence of his nation. That the position of the individual ego is conditioned solely by the interests of the nation as a whole. That above all, the unity of a nation's spirit and will are worth far more than the freedom and the spirit and will of an individual. We understand only the individual's capacity to make sacrifices for the community, for his fellow man. Hitler, my friend, was a true socialist. My friends, well, he was a true socialist. He was a true socialist. So, here's another quote from him. He said, I've learned a great deal from Marxism. In case you were wondering if he's really a Marxist, right? He said, I've learned a great deal from Marxism, as I do not hesitate to admit the difference between Marxists and myself. That the difference between Marxists and myself is that I have really put into practice what these peddlers and pen pushers have timidly begun. In other words, he was saying Marx and Engels and whoever came after him, they were just pen pushers and peddlers. He said, I actually implemented it. And that ended up with millions of people being killed, including 6 million Jews. All right? So, Hitler was no doubt, every good student of prophecy is going to tell you that Hitler was a forerunner of the Antichrist, right? And he embraced Marxism. And in his day, Marxism wasn't largely taught like it is taught today. Nearly in every university, every public university in America, Marxism is taught in a good light. Socialism, most of our kids coming out of university, they think socialism is the way to go. That's why you're seeing what you're seeing on the streets right now, right? So he said that then, what makes you think that the Antichrist wouldn't adopt that now and use it now? As a matter of fact, he has not abandoned it. Why? Because there has been a great effort to basically indoctrinate young people into that sort of thinking. All right, so guys, I still have more to go. The Antichrist will regulate all commerce, and if you have not the mark of the beast, you will starve. If you take the mark of the beast, you will perish in hell. Why? Why would God do that? Because once you take the mark of the beast, because you would have demonstrated your true nature, the materialistic nature. That is what that spirit appeals to, materialism. As a matter of fact, Karl Marx was a materialist, and that his philosophy was bent on and based on that. So socialism and communism always gives rise to dictators, abhorrent living conditions, and the talk of freedom while executing total enslavement. Right? If you don't know what communism and socialism is, I kind of try to define it for you. Socialism is the granddaddy of communism. But if you want to look at a communist country right now, look at China. Right? The actual political party, ruling party in China right now is called the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. I think so, yeah. And that they basically regulate everything, and we see that with the coronavirus pandemic that was happening right now in America. Half of America believes that the coronavirus actually started in the U.S. Right? The U.S. created it, unleashed it on their own people, and then they blame China. Right? And the U.S. believe that. You know why? Because even the American media actually spread that. But when you do some research and you look a little bit, you're going to see that the Chinese Communist Party, or the government, they're very big into conspiracy. They're very big into regulating news. And they have half of American media in their pockets. So they regulate this news out there for people to see. And they came up with a story. And the Americans believed it. Isn't that awesome? I think that was brilliant. Right? So when you look at when you look at China, you see that they regulate every picture you ever see. When you look at China, you would square that you look, every picture that you see of them, it's beautiful. You think you're looking at Times Square, and when you look at Beijing, it's lovely, and they're one of the most modern societies. They don't tell you that they have cameras everywhere, and if you spit on the street, you could get a fine in the mail and that kind of stuff, right? You never hear about that kind of stuff. You don't hear about the people who are starving in China and the people who are being killed for their faith in China. You don't really hear about those. You don't hear about the underground church, the Christian people who are suffering a whole lot in China. You wouldn't hear about those things because they're very, very good at hiding that. But look at the policies that we do know about under communism. They had something called the one-child policy, right? And we in America, we will beat them because we have politicians saying right now that you should not have children. You should not have babies. Think about that. Isn't that awesome? It's not good to have babies because of the climate. Think about what communism brought us. Communism under Hitler, socialism and Marxism under Hitler brought us the Holocaust. And how do students reconcile that, supporting a kind of thing like that? Oh, it's because it wasn't done right. And Hitler was a madman. Right? Under these philosophies, millions, and I'm not just talking about scores of millions, I'm talking about hundreds of millions of people have died under these philosophies. All right? I wanna go through this list very quickly, and I gave this list to you before, and I posted it up before. But today it's gonna have you're gonna see it in a whole different kind of light. All right? You're gonna see it in a whole different kind of light, because when I read this list to you before, we didn't have all the stuff that's going on in the world right now, but now you're gonna see it. Right? So this is the 45 communist goals as read into the Congressional Record in 1963. These goals were outlined in the book called The Naked Communist by W. Cleon Skousen in 1958. Right now, if you were to read it, if you were to research it, you're going to find people saying that that book was written by a nut job, when the dude was a former FBI agent and everything that he said was verifiable, right? And it was actually put into the Congressional Record in 1963, right? So there's 50 things that the communists decide to infiltrate America with, right? To basically take them from the inside out, because they know they couldn't match them militarily, right? And I'm going to go through not all 50, but I'm going to go through a few. And I'm going to also have some things, some pictures and stuff to go along with them, right? So one of those things is to develop the illusion that total disarmament by the United States would be a demonstration of moral strength. In other words, when they disarm themselves, they're going to be morally superior, right? That I remember hearing Barack Obama when he was just a senator, making fun of the Bible. When Jesus said, turn the other cheek, he said, if we were to engage that philosophy, I don't think the military would like it, and I don't think that we will be as great as we are, or whatever he said then, right? And then when he went into power, he basically ran the military down to its bare ribs, right? So the bottom line is, once you see the powers that be and the people of the country decide that total disarmament is the way we would go, right? And it's the way they justify that is by it's a sign of moral strength, right? The next one, permit free trade between nations regardless of communist affiliations, regardless of whether or not it could be used for war. The items could be used for war. So trade everything, free trade, even though they're communists. Today, America trades with China, right? That's proof of that, right? Provide American aid to all nations regardless of communist denomination. Okay. So even if you're communist, provide aid. And during the time of Stalin, America gave to Stalin millions, billions of dollars in aid. And the only reason why he was pretending to befriend America is because he was receiving that money, right? And from the moment he stopped receiving it, he turned again, right? Grant recognition to Red China, admission of Red China into the UN. Has that been done? Yes. Promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one world government with its own independent armed forces. Select communist leaders believe that the world can be taken over as easily by the UN as by Moscow. Sometimes these two centers compete with each other, as they are now doing in the Congo. right? So present the United Nations as the one world, the one hope for humanity, and reestablish it and um, redefine it as a one world government. Well, we know that's going to come in the last day. No two ways about that. And we had presidents in the United States all vying to do that. Right? We had presidents from George Bush Sr. come straight down. Actually, Jimmy Carter come straight down. They were trying to have a one world government. The biggest advocate for that was George Bush Sr. Right? Resist any attempt to outlaw the Communist Party. Do away, hear this one, do away with all loyal oaths. That's why today you're seeing people trying to get rid of the national anthem. You see people trying to get rid of the pledge. You see them trying to get rid of the flag of America. Why? Because all these things will conjure up some sort of patriotism, and allegiance to a nation. That's what it'll conjure up, right? So that's why the communists believe that they should get rid of all those things. Is it a coincidence that it's happening today? I don't know. You tell me. Is it a coincidence? Is it a coincidence that right now they're trying to burn everything down to the ground? You tell me. Here is one. Capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. I'm not going to get into politics. But look, you could go through this list and see who's trying to push all these things, right? And I think it's being pushed on both sides, by the way. Use technical decisions of courts to weaken basic American institutions by claiming their activities violate civil rights. Get control of schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communism propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of teachers' associations. Put the party line in textbooks. Guys, we have students walking around now with people who were criminals back in the day, and we have them on their t-shirts hailing them as lords and heroes. Right? This one might strike home. Use student riots to foment public protests against programs or organizations which are under communist attacks. I don't need to say any more on that. Infiltrate the press. Get control of book reviews, assignments, editorial writing, policy-making positions. Gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures. Yeah, I see nobody commenting on my. Don't worry. Yeah. Continue discrediting American culture. Continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression. An American communist cell was told to eliminate all good sculptures. Does it sound familiar? From parks and buildings. Eliminate all good sculpture from parks and buildings. Substitute shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms. So in the future, all the things that we've seen being pulled down right now, you're going to see them being replaced with things like these. Right? And we're going to have the enlightened and the philosophical and intellectually mature people amongst us saying things like, oh my gosh, I could really feel the expression of the sculpture there. Oh my gosh, I could see what he's saying. It's a road and it's intertwining. And it's converging. There's a convergence. Yeah. That's what we're going to see in the world. All right. Here the next one. Control art critics and directors of art museums. Our plan is to promote ugliness, repulsiveness, and meaningless art. Those are straight out of their mouths, my friends. Our plan is to promote ugliness, repulsive, and meaningless art. Right now, we've seen a lot of people who think that abstract art is the only art because our children, that's all they know. We're teaching our children to finger paint, and they can't put together a proper picture. They can't really express something within the lines. You don't encourage them. You color any way you want. Just not they'll ban coloring books. Let me tell you, they don't want good art because they don't want creative expression. Creative expression leads to free thinking. We don't want free thinking people. Control all critics and directors of art museums. Right? Well, I read that one already. Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. Do I need to say any more on that? Just look at our movies and see. how much obscenities we have there. As a matter of fact, anywhere you go, where I live right now, anywhere you go and you hear people talk, they must use obscenity in the language. I don't care who they are, red, yellow, black, or white, Democrat, Republican, everybody's talking the same way. And they talk with the same disgusting way. And it's the truth, because this has infiltrated the very consciousness of men, right? Number 26, promote homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. Tell me how protests about black lives being important turned into something about LGBTQ and trans lives and all these other things when we were talking about the suffering that the black man had to go through. Trust me, I think there should be a pushback on police brutality. I really think so, because I think some of these policemen have a God complex. I really do. But when we're dealing with that situation, let's deal with that situation. Don't try to roll in everything into one, right? Hear this one. You're going to like this one. And I have another day when I'm going to do this. Infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. Discredit the Bible and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. Right? So you replace revealed religion, as of revealed by the apostles, with social religion. That means whatsoever is right for the people. In the last days, men shall heap up unto themselves teachers having itching ears, saying things that they want to hear. The people behind the pulpit, they're going to preach what they want to hear and not what the word said, what revealed scriptures had said, right? I want to go through this very quickly because my time is running out. Eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools on the ground that it violates the principle of separation of church and state. By the way, separation of church and state is not a thing that is in the Constitution of America, by the way. That was just written by, I believe it was George Washington in a letter. And they took that and they used it as something that is almost legitimate, a law, right? And they try to uphold that, and now they use that. As a matter of fact, when that was written, separation of church and state, it was written to actually protect the church from the state. But no, they're using it to protect the state from the church. That's kind of weird. Here, this next one. This is very, very good. Discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate, old-fashioned, out of step with modern needs, a hindrance to cooperation between nations on a worldwide basis. So when you see a man comes up and he says, okay, we want to we want to concentrate on our country, they'll say, oh my gosh, this dude is a nationalist. That's the same thing that Hitler did. See it? All right. But when the truth is, nationalism, a person taking pride in their country, is not a bad thing. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. Guess what? If any Trini walks out of Trinidad and Tobago, whether Trinidad and Tobago is on fire or not, we still reminisce about our country in a romantic way. Even though there's wrong happening in it, we love our country, right? Now I live in America. I love America. I'm glad that I'm here. There are issues to work out, and I think that's one of the reasons why God put me here in the first place. So there are things to work out, but nationalism is not racism, because I don't see one race, America belonging to one race. I don't see it that way. And guess what? Most Americans don't see it that way either. But there we have a few people pushing that agenda, and everybody has to abide by that, or else their lives will be destroyed. This next one. Discredit the American founding fathers. Present them as selfish aristocrats who had no concern for the common man. No concern for the common man. Right? So right now there's a demonizing of all the people who founded America. Belittle, this is good. Number 31. Belittle all forms of American culture and discourage the teaching of American history on the ground that was only a minor part of the big picture. Give more emphasis to Russian history since the communists took over. Let me tell you, this is a different thing that I'm going to talk about the next day. But we have something called revisionist history. Right now, they're rewriting all the history. And what people don't realize is that when you see they pull down all the statues and they revise all the history and all that, there will come a generation after ours, should the Lord tarry, who will not know actually what happened in the past. And these people will get to form history in any which way they want. You understand? So when we get rid of all the monuments and all these things reminding us of where we came from, when those are all gone, what do our children have? I know that there are kids today, if you tell them about the Holocaust, they have no clue what that is. There will come a day, my friends, and mark my words, right, when there will be a generation who would not know what slavery was in history. And that's quite deliberate, by the way. Support any socialist movement to give centralized control over any part of the culture, education, social agencies, welfare programs, mental health clinics. Right? So they want to take that. Eliminate all laws or procedures which interfere with the operation of communist apparatus. And we've seen that happening, by the way. Eliminate the House Committee on Un-American Activities. So blame them while you push your un-American agenda, blame them for being un-American. Right? To him that is pure, all things are pure. To him that is defiled, all things are defiled. Titus 1 and 15. Right? Discredit and eventually dismantle the FBI. That doesn't sound familiar at all. Doesn't sound familiar at all. Infiltrate and gain control of big business. Woo! This is a big one. I don't want to talk too much on it. But look at Google, look at Apple, look at all of them. They're all under the progressive agenda. All of them are adhering to some of the things on this list already. So I don't know where we're going. Oh, this one is good, guys. Ready for this, ready for this, ready for this. Transfer some of the powers of arrest from the police to social agencies. Treat all behavioral problems as psychiatric disorders, which no one but psychiatrists can understand. Yeah, that's why we're seeing to defund the police. Once you see we weaken the police system, then we could get into the psychiatric thing. You know why? Because it's easy. It's easier to say a person has mental problems. Because when you see you arrest a person, that person holds to his mind. That person still says, you know what, I'm an individual. When you tell a person you're messed up in the mind, he begins to question himself. When you begin to question yourself, you lose all stability. When you lose all stability, then we could take a fully control who you are. Yes. Dominate the psychiatric profession and use mental health laws as means of gaining coercive control over those that oppose communist goals. Discredit the family as an institution, encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. And I don't even want to talk about that. Emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents, attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and retarding of children to suppressive influence of parents. Yeah, we give up children permission to do anything, but once you try to teach them and school them, correct them in any way, you're an abusive parent in the world that we live in right now. Right, and I'm down to one of my last ones. Create the impression that violence and insurrection are legitimate aspects of American tradition, that students and special interest groups should rise up and use united force to solve economic, political, and social problems. I'm going to read that again. Create the impression that violence and insurrection are legitimate aspects of American tradition, and students and special interest groups should rise up and use united force to solve economic, political, and social problems. It is no coincidence, my friend, that Black Lives Matter, the people who started that, and Antifa, and some of these other little groups you see now there, they're Marxists. And some of you saying you don't believe me. I'm going to show you right now one of the founders of Black Lives Matter speaking. Yeah. While we get the audio ready on that, I fully expected that not to show. I fully expected it. Right, but that lady you saw there, she was one of the founders of Black Lives Matter, right? And I really believe that Black Lives Matter, but I don't believe in that group and that organization, by the way. Right? So you ready for me now? Yeah. All right. So here's one of the founders. Hopefully it'll work this time.
The criticism is helpful. I also think that it might... I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
Right. So, I mean, you heard it from the horse's mouth, right? So, and the thing is, they are not shy to say it because they don't see, what this thing really is. They don't see it as something bad. They see it as something good. So you can't really blame them. This is what they've been taught, right? So it's amazing that not many people right now are in opposition to what's going on on the earth, where governments are exercising their full authority and beyond. And we're seeing governments instituting powers of arrest because people break in quarantine, and you can't, if you don't wear a mask, they lock you up and they fine you, and the same people who instituting these laws or whatever are the same people who going out and they're playing golf and again their haircuts like usual, while the rest of us we're looking like zombies and cavemen coming out from a house. When we see the light of day, we can't even open our eyes properly, right? And nobody stopped to think, okay, what's the real deal behind that? Because we've had SARS, we've had things happen before, but we never treated with this intensity, right? So you make the judgment on that. I'm not making a judgment on anybody, right? But I want to close with this little quote that I read from Joseph Stalin. The easiest way to gain control of the population is to carry out acts of terror. The public will clamor for such laws if their personal security is threatened. The public will clamor for such laws if their personal security is threatened, right? And that's kind of like what we've seen in the earth. Guys, I kind of went into detail today as to what you're going to see in the days of the Antichrist. I'm not saying all these things are happening today. I'm just drawing comparisons. I'm not saying Black Lives Matter is bad. I'm not saying George Floyd is one way or the other. I'm not saying that he wasn't a great individual. I'm not saying any of those things. What I'm saying is I put that out there, and it's up to you to go research it. I don't want you to believe me, just off the cuff. I want you to go look into it and check it. The book that I mentioned, The Naked Communist, it's a particularly awesome read. You should go read it and judge for yourself. Go look at history. Read up on the French Revolution, see what they did there. Those of you that don't know about the Holocaust, brace your heart and go in and visit the terror that is the Holocaust and see who this madman was. Find out a little bit, not just about Karl Marx philosophy, but find out about the man who he was, and all the people he influenced, right? Marxists and socialists and communists are not the only ideologies that are going to overtake in the last day. They're not the only groups that are going to try to run. There's an amalgam of groups that are coming up in the world that is going to form the last day order. There's groups that have been infiltrating the church. I'm going to talk about that too, right? And the Bible talks about all that as well. So we're going to talk about that another day. My time is up. I think I went way too long on this, but I hope that you got something from this today. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me a mail, send me a text or anything you want, and I will try to look into all of this for you and try to answer it. So guys, thank you for joining us today on Preacher Man TV. I hope that you were blessed. Trust me, this is not something that you have to worry about, by the way, even though we're living in this world right now. The greatest tribulation that the world will ever see, right, is after we're gone, after God takes us away. God bless you. Love you. See you soon.